thank President Trump for his commitment to work with us to find a solution that keeps TikTok available in the United States.
TikTok should not be banned, it should be sold. China should not own it, but it should continue to exist in this country.
The number one threat to our homeland security is the southern border.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, TikTok, time's up. Supreme Court says the Chinese-owned social media app can be banned in this country unless a new owner in the United States can be found. The Biden administration said today it will not enforce this law. But with 170 million users across the United States eager to find out what's next, what role will President-elect Trump play in the future of TikTok? Plus, waiting for a vote. Israel's government is meeting right now to decide on the Gaza ceasefire deal. This comes just hours after the Security Cabinet recommended approving that multi-phase agreement. Once approved, there are lots of questions. What happens next? When will it be implemented? And most importantly, will those first hostages be released on Sunday? Lastly, Homeland nominee on the Hill. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem fields questions from senators as she vies to lead the department. What the governor, who was one of the first in the United States to send her National Guard to the border to help Texas, had to say about illegal immigration.
We will undertake a large job and a large duty that we have to fulfill, that the American people expect us to do, by securing our border, to make sure that our nation is a nation with borders, or we're no nation at all.
There's a big question over this. Stephen Miller, who you see there, is going to have a very significant role inside the Trump White House on immigration policy, meaning will he be more important than the nominee and the future secretary, Kristi Noem, of the Department of Homeland Security? We're going to start this evening with Nancy Cordes and the news that the second inauguration of Donald Trump will be held inside the Capitol. Nancy, great to see you. This was not an unexpected announcement today, but it does shake a lot of things up.
It really does, Major, because as you can imagine, there are folks on Capitol Hill who have been planning for up to a year to pull off this inauguration. It involves the building of an entirely new platform on the west front of the Capitol, all of the security, all the preps for the media, all of the preps for tens of thousands of people to gather on the National Mall to witness the swearing in at noon on Monday. And suddenly this morning we learned that President-elect Trump was going to be moving his inauguration into the Capitol, just as Ronald Reagan did, and for the same reason, because it is going to be bitterly cold on Monday, around 20 degrees, but with winds up to 30 miles per hour, which will make it feel even colder. And so from a safety perspective, it was obviously the best thing to do. There were some who wondered whether Trump would be willing to take that step, because obviously the most majestic images come from seeing any president be sworn in right there with the Capitol dome as a backdrop. But you know, his new location for an inauguration isn't too shabby either. He will be inside the Capitol Rotunda, and plans are feverishly being put in place to move the ceremony indoors. Obviously, they can't fit as many people inside as they would have outside, and so some people will be able to witness it in person. Others are being encouraged to go somewhere warm and watch it there.
And one of the places they can go to be warm and to watch it is Capital One Arena, where we were told today the parades associated with some of the inaugural events will be conducted.
Right. I mean, as you can imagine, if the temperatures aren't safe for those who are going to be attending the inauguration and participating in it, then they're not all that great for people who have traveled from all over the country to perform in the inaugural parade or to watch the inaugural parade either. And so Trump posted earlier today that those who want to watch the ceremony on a screen and who want to see the parade in person should go to Capital One Arena in downtown D.C. He's going to be holding a rally at the same arena the day before. He said he'll have a message for those who are gathered there. So that is a space, you know, it holds tens of thousands of people. So it is a space that a lot of his supporters can go to, although there is obviously some disappointment that they won't be able to gather on the mall and watch the entire ceremony unfold in person.
Nancy, one other topic before I let you go, TikTok and what President-elect Trump said about it today and his overall orientation to this thing that is now going to be on his desk once he arrives on Monday.
Right. So there was a really fascinating sequence of events that unfolded today. First of all, the Supreme Court said that it is going to allow this ban that was passed by Congress that is supposed to be imposed on Sunday that would prevent TikTok from continuing to remain on U.S. platforms because it has not been sold to a U.S. buyer by its Chinese owner. The Supreme Court said we're not going to weigh in, as Trump had asked them to do. And then the Biden administration said, guess what? We're not really going to take action either. With 1 day left in the Biden administration, so many officials have already sort of packed up and said their goodbyes. The Biden administration isn't going to do anything to try to make TikTok go dark either. And so it really is going to be left up to the Trump administration exactly how hard and how soon to enforce this ban. Donald Trump has made it clear he's not so sure he wants to enforce the ban. He likes the way TikTok looked during the campaign, lots of videos praising him. And so he said that Congress has left it up to him. And he even said that he talked to the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, about it when they spoke this morning, Major.
Nancy Cordes, thank you so much. In West Palm Beach, Florida, which I can assure everyone is much warmer than we are here in Washington, D.C. Nancy, thanks so much. Kadia Goba and Finn Gomez are here. Kadia, you might remember, political reporter for Semaphore, and Finn Gomez, of course you know, the political director for CBS News. Kadia, I want to start with you. So there are going to be a lot of things next week that come from the new second Trump administration. He knew that this TikTok thing was going to be right there. How he tries to solve this sets up as either something that disappoints 170 million platform users or, in kind of quintessential Trumpian fashion, is a deal that saves things at the last second.
Yeah, everyone's anticipating or looking to what the incoming president will do, but it's unclear that he has any authority over this. The courts have spoken.
Right.
And more importantly, one of the measures is that, you know, people like Apple and the service providers will be fined if they have the app on their platform. So it's very unclear. I'm sure they don't want to pay those fines, and I'm not sure they're going to take that loss for the incoming president. It's not clear why he could do anything to prevent this.
Unless he figures out a way to strike a deal where it is an American owner who purchases it from ByteDance and brings not only the servers, which are already, as TikTok will tell everyone, in Texas.
Yeah.
They're already here, but the controlling ownership, U.S.-based as well. Finn?
Yeah, and obviously this is also it's also tweaks the Chinese government, frankly. You know, if he does move that, if that does happen, shifts it, and he also has said that he has shifted himself on his position on TikTok, right? I mean, in part because
complete reversal.
Yeah, in part because of the bro vote, right? We all recall that young male voter who came out in support for Donald Trump. What we saw in November's election. So if he does come out and does that, he becomes the TikTok savior. Yeah.
So. We're going to have an inauguration indoors. Yeah. Much smaller crowd, much quieter. And yet, Finn, I think you know this. We all know this. There's going to be a table right next to wherever he gives his remarks after he's sworn in, and he's going to start the executive order process right then and there.
With a flurry. And they have said so. Like
not even going to wait to get back to the White House.
Not even. It's going to happen right there in that rotunda. And I think that, all the sources, the Trump sources that we've been speaking to, the incoming administration sources that we've been speaking to, have all said that it will be a very impactful day. We're going to see a historic amount of executive actions that day, including on immigration.
Yeah, especially on immigration. Democrats are already anticipating multiple executive orders, one specifically that will talk or deputize local government or local law enforcement to act as, ICE patrol people. So that'll be interesting. I think, like I said, Democrats are already preparing for some of this now.
And, Kadia, not just Democrats on Capitol Hill, but Democratic state attorneys general are girding for this. California, lots of other states where Democrats hold positions of attorney general, they're on the lookout for these executive actions and orders to see if there's anything that they can do legally to either slow or blunt some of these actions coming from Trump 2.0.
Also, governors in those sanctuary cities are also, they've been having meetings. I've been talking to them also, and it's unclear where there's going to be about. Obviously, this is going to go to the courts eventually, but we do anticipate, or many of them anticipate, there to be some action on the ground at the beginning.
Finn, have you heard anything about whether or not any of these executive orders or actions will invoke emergency declarations or powers that flow from that, either economic, immigration, national security, or otherwise?
I have heard something along those lines.
There's some hardliners who talk that way. Whether they actually come to fruition, I guess, is the big question.
Yeah, that is what we're waiting for. That is like the equation that needs to be answered, that needs to be solved. But we have heard that. I was at the RNC winter meetings earlier today, and there was some talk of that with some of the sources that I was speaking to there. But again, we have to wait. In a couple of days, we will see what he will do. I have to just go back to that rotunda just for a second. I was just there a little while ago, Major, and to me, I mean, going from, and I was at Trump's first inauguration outside. It wasn't as cold as it's supposed to be on Monday, but to go from that space to like such a smaller space, it's really unique. It's historic, and just being there, you can feel that. And of course, we talked about, there's some echoes of Reagan from 1985, of course, the last time he was there. And also, I mean, with the potential release of, the expected release of the hostages happening, that echoes of Reagan 1980 as well. There's a lot of kind of like these historical kind of connections back to that time.
And to just do a little AccuWeather forecasting here, 8 degrees, supposed to be the ambient temperature at noon Monday here in Washington, D.C. It was supposed to be 7 on the day of Reagan's second inauguration in 1985. So almost identical wind patterns and temperatures, bringing them both inside. 25 degrees, 30 degrees, chilly, but we can handle that. I've covered those inaugurations. You've covered those inaugurations. I'm sure you have. But this would have been a highly dangerous situation for first responders, law enforcement, Secret Service, and Trump attendees. They would have been jeopardized if this thing had been held outside, even though we all know that President-elect Trump would have preferred the grandeur of it all. This is the wisest, safest decision.
One senior Trump advisor told me that, he referenced the Supreme Court justices who were going to be out there as well. Like, it has the dangerous feel. Of course, you and I have also been in Iowa when it was much colder than that, Major Garrett.
But not for 8 hours.
Not for 8
hours straight. That's the whole deal. That's the deal. That's the whole deal. And Kadia, real quickly, we talked about Kristi Noem's confirmation hearing today. There is this on-running dialogue behind the scenes about how influential she'll be on core immigration policy, or is that going to be really directed by Tom Homan, the border czar, and Stephen Miller, who's the deputy chief of staff right next to the president inside the White House?
Great question. I think Miller is going to have a big impact on the legislation that is coming out of Congress. But Homan is going to be that person on the ground directing all of this. He has the he has the law enforcement background, and this is why he was chosen. He is going to facilitate all of the things happening on the ground. And I think Miller will be more behind the scenes.
And in the conversations I've heard, it describes Kristi Noem, if confirmed, which she is very much likely to be, in charge of the other DHS obligations, TSA, FEMA, other things that are all very important, cybersecurity, super important, but just not be the lead voice or figure on immigration.
You're exactly right.
Is that your impression as well, Finn?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Kadia Goba. Finn Gomez. And Finn, we're so glad your microphone is now back belongs where it should be. Thanks so much. And a quick reminder, programming note, this is good, important. CBS News 24/7 coverage of the inauguration of Donald Trump begins Monday at 6 a.m. And please join Lindsay Reiser and me at 6 p.m. Eastern from the Capitol for a recap of the day's biggest moments and celebratory events. Supreme Court has ruled, as we've mentioned, TikTok's got to be banned by Sunday, or at least the process needs to begin there. But will the social media site be shut down for good? We're going to take a closer look at the decision and its implications next. But first, with Monday's inauguration moved indoors due to cold weather, let's take a look back at our 9th president. He wasn't in office long. William Henry Harrison delivered his inaugural address March 4th, 1841, taking the oath of office without a top hat or coat, even though it was very cold and rainy. He spoke for nearly 2 hours. The inaugural address ran more than 8,000 words. couple of weeks after, as a result of that exposure, he developed pneumonia and passed away on April 4th, a 1-month presidency, the shortest in our history. Stay with us. America Decides continues next. Welcome back to America Decides. As we've been talking about, the Supreme Court upheld a law today that would ban TikTok in the United States beginning Sunday. Concerned users of this highly popular social media app, but might not be locked out right away. There's a process that goes on here. The Biden administration says it's not going to enforce the ban, meaning that process, the timetable of it, how noticeable it will be, falls to President-elect Trump when he is sworn in on Monday. To talk and learn more about this, Jan Crawford joins us, as does Alan Rosenstein. Jan, of course, is the CBS News chief legal correspondent. Alan is associate professor of law at the University of Minnesota Law School. Jan, let's just break down what the court did and what it let stand.
Well, I mean, the court unsigned opinion, which is notable because the court and those justices were really speaking with one voice.
So 9-0 essentially is the way to interpret that.
The ultimate decision was unanimous,
right.
Yes. I said, look, we recognize that 170 million people rely on this app for, you know, their source of community, for their ability to express themselves and be creative, but that cannot overcome what Congress concluded was serious and well-documented national security concerns. So they were not going to give TikTok this kind of last-minute reprieve and save them from this law. Now, you pointed out that, you know, perhaps there's some things that could be in the works. President Biden has indicated he is not going to give any kind of extension, and he's going to leave that to, you know, President-elect Trump, who now likes TikTok, apparently, and is saying he can do some kind of deal or find some kind of solution. The U.S. CEO of TikTok today said, you know, we're really grateful President Trump wants to find a solution. So, you know, he's trying to drive that point home. But I don't know what it can be. I mean, there's not a lot that the law is the law. Mm-hmm. You know, Congress passed this overwhelmingly bipartisan support, and now it's kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, we are getting what we asked for.
Did we really mean that?
Yeah, and so not all of them, and we saw some senators today, including like Senator Hawley and others saying, you know, this is the law and the law should be followed with good reason because TikTok can do all these kind of things and we can't have our foreign adversaries. So, you know, I mean, we'll see. But the clock, I mean, time is running out. And it won't go dark. The law doesn't require it to go dark unless TikTok wants it to.
Right. Alan, I want to get your perspective on this term of art that's in the law, foreign adversary control. And is that a way that TikTok can find, or does it necessarily need to find a U.S. owner? Or does it need to find an owner that can pass this foreign adversary control metric?
Yeah, that's right. So TikTok doesn't need a U.S. owner. It just needs an owner that's not one of 4 countries, China, Russia, North Korea, or Iran. So if it finds a U.S. owner, a Canadian owner, an Australian owner, a European owner, it's going to be fine. But the real problem here has always been not finding an owner. There are plenty of people who would love to buy TikTok, but rather the Chinese government permitting ByteDance to sell TikTok to someone else.
And Alan, what is the Chinese government's interest in keeping not only TikTok, but ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest, it's the algorithm behind it and the data that flows from it?
Well, there are a couple of reasons that the Chinese government might not want to sell TikTok. I think the main one is that TikTok is most useful to China if it is in fact controlled by ByteDance for precisely the national security reasons that Congress cited when enacting the law, data privacy and content manipulation. But the other reason is that if TikTok can't be a Chinese company, I think it's actually better for China if TikTok is banned outright, because then the Chinese have a talking point when they themselves are criticized for censorship, for the Great Firewall of China, for balkanizing themselves off from the rest of the internet. They can look at America and say, hey, look, you guys do this too. So I think it's really in no one's interest, unless Trump does some real diplomacy with Chinese President Xi Jinping. But that raises its own concerns about what exactly is Trump going to give up in order to get this deal.
What are the legal implications for Apple, Google, Oracle, who serve this process, meaning the TikTok application and platform?
So they're the ones that the law actually is enforced against, and they have to pay fines up to $5,000 per user for facilitating TikTok. And given that TikTok has 170 million users, that those numbers add up pretty quickly. There's a lot of talk about the Biden administration not enforcing the law in the last day and a half, or Trump saying that he's not going to enforce the law. But enforcing the law is actually not the point. The law is the law on the 19th, and these companies will be subject to it. So whether or not Trump enforces the law, these companies and their legal counsel in particular are going to have to ask tough questions about, do we want to go out on a limb and continue violating this law, even if Trump has said for the moment, because of course he's very mercurial and changes his mind a lot, that Trump has said for the moment he's not going to enforce it.
Jan, did the court in any way, shape, or form plow new ground on the First Amendment, or just remind people of where it's always been?
Very narrow ruling, kind of keeping, and because the rapid time frame, the quick turnaround, which they pointed out in the decision, I think that is pretty much cabin to this case. That's how they would hope it to be. And they specifically said that they were not going to decide some of these bigger issues that were out there. They were going to keep it very narrowly focused on this case and this law.
You mentioned it, but just to remind the audience how quick a turnaround this is. I mean,
2 weeks, really,
2 weeks.
Basically.
Arguments 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, well, they granted it, then had arguments last Friday, and now a decision today with that deadline looming of the 19th.
Highly unusual and significant. Jan Crawford, Alan Rochenstein, thank you very much for your expertise. I appreciate it. The Israeli Security Cabinet gave it the green light. Lawmakers are voting on it. The latest on the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Israel's full cabinet is voting right now on the ceasefire deal with Hamas. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Notably, Israel's cabinet is meeting after sunset on this Friday, working into Shabbat, which is not the norm for observant Jews, which should be a day of rest. But this is indicative of just how important this meeting is to approve or potentially to reject that ceasefire and hostage deal. Now, the cabinet has been talking with the Israeli negotiating team for the past several hours, from what we understand at least. And going into it, the expectation is that the cabinet would approve it. And this is after the smaller security cabinet earlier today recommended approving that deal. But that agreement, that talk, was not without friction. Two of Netanyahu's cabinet ministers, two far-right cabinet ministers, mind you, voted the deal down, but that, we know, didn't stop the approval process. Now, if this is approved beyond the full cabinet, there would be a 24-hour window where we might expect lawsuits. The legal system might come in here. This would likely be from families who had loved ones killed by any of those Palestinian detainees currently in Israeli prisons who do not want to see them go free. If those are resolved, however, we could see hostages out this Sunday. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Israeli airstrikes continued overnight, and the Hamas-run Civil Defense Agency now says that at least 113 people have been killed there since the ceasefire deal was announced just 2 nights ago. But that deal is still not signed, we know, which in effect allows for Israel to keep striking Gaza in its pledge to destroy Hamas. The updated number of dead is now approaching 46,800 people. That is according to the health ministry. Back to you.
Ramy Inocencio, thank you. President Biden has been busy in his final days in the White House, issued a flurry of executive actions. Some of those, President Trump, once he takes office, is very likely to reverse. Which ones? Well, we'll get a perspective on that from our political panel, which is standing by to weigh in on that and much, much more. You're watching America Decides. Stay with us. Welcome back to America Decides. Not sure if you've heard about this, but on Monday, President-elect Trump is going to be inaugurated for a second term. Talk about that. Kevin Sheridan, Republican strategist, Joel Payne, Democratic strategist. Kevin, you're the winning side. Sketch out what the first week looks like of the Trump 2.0 administration.
I think it's shock and awe 2.0. I think.
What does that mean? A lot of people say that. What does that mean? Who's going to be shocked and who's going to be awed?
It sounds like there's going to be a lot of activity with EOs on
executive orders
on the border, on immigrants who are here illegally now, especially criminals. I think you'll see probably a lot of energy executive orders on drilling on land that he wants to
federal lands being
potentially open up. I could see him halting wind projects. He's been talking a lot about the whales, so. I could see him. Look, they've had 4 years to plan for this one. It's going to be a lot different than 2016. I think they've got the personnel in place. I think they're ready to go. I mean, this transition from a Republican perspective has looked much, much different. There's very little Republican opposition anymore, almost none. And they know that they've got to deliver on the mandate that the American people just gave him. And I think he's going to get started right away.
And that question about loyalty to Trump has already been asked and answered. You're not in if you have any clouds hanging over you on that question, right?
Yeah, I think he's got the personnel he wants. His candidates for the cabinet are going through really well. I don't see any of them going down right now. Obviously, we still got RFK and a couple more to go, but it's looking like it's going to be off to a very good start for him.
Joel, when you hear words like shock and awe from a Democratic perspective, what does that instill in you?
I think it instills a lot of concern, not just from a Democratic perspective, but for the 75 million people that voted for Kamala Harris, for the millions more that may have voted for Donald Trump but did not vote for the version of Donald Trump that we're hearing saber rattling about. It really depends on how you define this mandate that Donald Trump believes he has. I don't think it's a mandate to go and turn communities against each other, to pull people out of synagogues and churches and schools and places of worship and workplaces and turn neighborhoods against each other. I think it was for cheaper eggs and common sense. That was the mandate. And so if Donald Trump chooses to stray away from that mandate, I think politically he'll be punished for it. He's enjoying a honeymoon this time around like he didn't last time around. I think that'll be very short-lived if he overreads this mandate.
When Joel says cheaper eggs and common sense and also talks about the potential of immigration raids in schools, churches, places of work, is that what we're going to see, or do you think other things will be on the immigration front that are more selective and less politically potent or injurious to Trump?
Yeah, I think the sweet spot for getting this started the right way is probably make it very much about the criminals that are here. Anybody that's got a criminal record, anybody that violates the law while they're in the United States and has been let out, they should be gone after right away. I think that's where you're going to see the biggest focus on them. And then you're going to see a lot of different, I think, measures taken so that people choose to deport themselves. I mean, we talked a lot about self-deportation going way back to 2012.
You remember that? You were on that
we got mocked
campaign.
for it, but it's actually started to even happen now. You're seeing reports of it.
What's his second pitch?
What do you mean?
I mean, after he goes and does the shock and awe immigration, what's his plan? How's he going to make life more affordable for the American people? How is he going to actually govern
tax cuts for the middle class?
Govern as a majority politician. It's easy to campaign as an opposition politician. It's not easy to govern and keep a majority coalition together. And Donald Trump has not proven he can do that.
As you know, he cut regulation the first time. He lowered taxes for the middle class last time. The economy took off. And I think you're going to see the same thing this time. That's what Republicans have been working on with the bill that they're crafting right now. And you're going to see some of it legislatively, some of it regulatory. And I think it's going to all take off next week.
And how much of this is going to depend on Trump's working relationship with House Republicans and House Republican leadership and the very, very nearly historic, not more than 100 years if we had a majority of either party as small as this one's going to be?
Hey, they're all in it together. So if they can't get something passed, if one person holds them up, if two people, decide that they want to tank something, it's going to be all on them. Trump's going to have to mobilize the MAGA base. There's an entire MAGA network, media network out there now.
So social media influencers and others?
Very powerful with Republican primary voters. And if any of these guys, if they don't want to keep their jobs, maybe they're a skunk at the party. But I can't see a lot of that right now. There just doesn't seem to be the will for it.
So this is what fealty looks like. And I just want to say politically, this is what is going to, it's what fealty looks like. I mean, Donald Trump is talking about withholding relief aid to Los Angeles and tying it to this giant reconciliation bill, which is going to be a Christmas tree for our friends a block over on K Street. I don't think that this is going to wear well. I get that people are excited and full of vigor because Donald Trump is more popular than he's ever been, but I don't know if this is going to wear well in 3 months and 6 months. And again, we've never seen Donald Trump govern as a majority politician.
He's a results-oriented guy, if nothing else. I think he knows he's got to get the economy fixed. He's got to get inflation down. He's got to fix the border. If he doesn't do those things, you're right.
He'll be held accountable politically. How do you think this TikTok thing plays out with Trump coming in and reversing. He's now a fan of it, wants to try to find some grandiose deal to say, I'm the great deal maker. How do you see that going?
Sounds like they're going to try to get a delay on it. I don't know how you really
There's a 90-day window that you can sort of delay harsh implementation of it, and maybe you use that as a negotiating time period.
I think he will twist every arm he can to try to get the Chinese to sell
but he has to go through the Chinese to do it, because there's no shortage of potential
buyers. Well, it says a lot about
buyers.
TikTok and the Chinese Communist Party that they're not selling, even though there are buyers out there for it. So
what
if
does
they're
that mean
selling,
to you?
What do you think it means? It
that
means
they know what it is.
They're using it as spyware.
This is interesting to me. This fits into a growing narrative. And look, Joe Biden talked about the oligarchy, he talked about the robber barons, but let's just speak plainly. There are going to be billionaires, the three richest men in the world, in the history of the world, are going to be surrounding Donald Trump when he takes the oath of office. Okay, and I don't think that the American people signed up for this. Again, it's how you define the mandate. Did the American people, the people who voted for Donald Trump, did they sign up for Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Peter Thiel, who is sponsoring J.D. Vance to control everything?
These are the most successful entrepreneurs in the history of our country.
And you want them to make every decision for us.
They're not just financiers who are, coming in and, however George Soros made his money. So, look, there's billionaires on both sides. These guys, if they have something to offer, Elon Musk is a very successful, very smart guy. If he has something to offer on getting the government more efficient, he should listen. And
he maybe should not be the biggest government contractor we have right now.
Joel Payne gets the last word on this Friday. Joel Payne, Kevin Sheridan, thanks so much.
On my first day back in the Oval Office, I will sign a historic slate of executive orders to close our border to illegal aliens and stop the invasion of our country.
You just heard it, and we talked about it. President-elect Trump is pledging on day one lots of executive orders on border crossings, deportations, and maybe other immigration-related matters. We're going to talk more about that when we come back. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. We don't do a lot of predicting of the future here, but this you can be certain of. Starting Monday, after President-elect Trump is sworn in, immigration policy is going to noticeably change in this country. And I want to talk to one of our in-house experts about that, Camilo Montoya Galvez, who is one of the sharpest and best immigration reporters in Washington. All right. I want to start with some basics so the audience can walk along with us. I want to show the graphic we have, ladies and gentlemen, of ICE deportations over the many years. Obama administration, Trump administration, Biden administration. Please put that up. Okay, you can see in red, those are the Trump years. They were they were higher in aggregate in the Obama years.
That's right.
They were very low, noticeably lower in the first 3 years of the Biden administration. Then this huge spike. So the last year of the Biden administration actually higher than any one year in the Trump administration.
A 10-year high, actually.
Yes, 10-year high. That's actually just a way to understand what this country has been doing under different administrations when it comes to deportations. What can we expect on Monday, Camille, in terms of announcements, actions from this incoming administration?
Well, Major, we should expect the incoming administration to move aggressively and quickly to reshape federal immigration and border policy, including by undoing many Biden administration immigration programs. That includes initiatives that currently allow migrants abroad to come here legally. That could mean scaling back the refugee admissions program, also ending Biden administration parole programs that basically allow people who have sponsors to fly into the U.S. legally to relieve pressure at the border. As an alternative to crossing the border illegally, the Biden administration set up these channels so people could come here in a safe, legal, and orderly way. But the Trump administration, the incoming administration, argues, just like Republicans do, that this is an overreach of federal immigration authority, that this is not allowed in the current law, and that these programs should be dismantled. The concern among advocates is that if you do that, then more people are going to start crossing
You're going to pressurize the borders, either at ports of entry or in very dangerous places that are less thoroughly and aggressively patrolled by Border Patrol.
Significant portion of this, Major, is undoing Biden administration policy, but another significant portion is reinstating policies from the first Trump administration. That includes the so-called Remain in Mexico policy that essentially requires asylum applicants to await their asylum hearings on the other side of the border in Mexico instead of being released here into the U.S. under what Republicans denounce as catch and release. That would, of course, require diplomatic talks with the Mexican government.
And cooperation
because they have to accept the returns of migrants. That also includes the reinstatement of something called worksite enforcement. these are immigration arrests, immigration sweeps at work sites like poultry plants, factories that are hiring workers who are in the country illegally. That practice was discontinued under the Biden administration, which argued that these efforts should be concentrated on the employers who are exploiting undocumented laborers, not on the undocumented immigrants themselves. But the incoming border czar, Tom Homan, has been telling us, including 60 Minutes, that worksite enforcement will continue. So we should expect what advocates would call raids on work sites very early on. And we should also expect some sort of effort to try to undo what we know as birthright citizenship. This is a longstanding interpretation of the U.S. Constitution that affords children who are born here on American soil citizenship regardless and irrespective of who their parents are, whether they are in the country illegally. Right now, if someone who is here illegally has a child here, that child is a U.S. citizen. The incoming administration wants to reverse that 100%.
And Tom Homan has said somewhat glibly, we don't believe necessarily in family separation. So if there's a deportation order for a relative who is undocumented and their children or other relatives are U.S. citizens, the way to solve that is they all have to leave.
The families can be deported together. That's what he has been saying. And that is something that could happen because right now, according to one study, there are 4 million U.S. citizen children, Major, who are living with at least one parent who is in the country illegally without legal status. And what Homan is saying, because ICE does not have the authority to deport U.S. citizens, is that the children, or the parents rather, can opt to have their U.S. citizen children come with them to their home countries and self-deport, essentially, as opposed to the parents being deported by themselves to their home countries and leaving their children here with a sponsor or in the foster care system. But of course, that raises the question of how these home countries actually integrate what are American citizens.
We have not heard the last of either these implementation issues or what defines family separation. Camila Montoya Galvez, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Where's Ricky Sanders? Here he comes.
You don't see that every day. That was President Ronald Reagan's really good pass to the great Ricky Sanders during the then Washington Redskins' visit to the White House, 1988, to celebrate their Super Bowl victory. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the nation's capital was home to one of the most storied franchises in the NFL. You had Joe Gibbs, the Hogs, Art Monk's Fun Bunch. In all, 3 Super Bowl victories. Well, that's become a thing of the past since the turn of the century. Between multiple name changes to the team, season-ending injuries, long-awaited change in ownership, wins here in D.C., for the football fans, few and far between. But for those fans, there is renewed hope and more than a sliver of optimism. And that sliver sits squarely on the shoulders of a new rookie quarterback who has already surpassed lofty expectations placed on him. The Commanders, that's the team name now, head to Detroit this weekend to face the Lions. That's Saturday night. If they win, that will put them in the NFC Championship for the first time since 1991, which, by the way, was the last year they brought home the Lombardi Trophy. Next, on the front line, the photographer who has been capturing the California wildfires, his amazing and poignant images and firsthand account is next. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back. As you've no doubt taken notice, firefighters in Southern California, thanks to the diminishing, raging Santa Ana winds, have been making steady, though agonizing progress, containing or attempting to contain wildfires around the Los Angeles area that have killed 27 people and destroyed more than 12,000 structures. Here's just some of the damage we are seeing. These photographs were taken by photographer Stuart Paley, who has been photographing wildfires for the better part of a decade. He joins us now. Stuart is also the author, I'm proud to say, of The Inferno, a photographer's journey through California's mega fires and fallout. Stuart, it's great to have you with us. As a native of Southern California, this story hits me pretty hard. And I have many friends who've had to evacuate. Fortunately, their structures haven't been burned to the ground, but many of their friends' structures, residences, apartments have. And what they keep telling me via text and email is no photograph properly conveys the magnitude of what's happened. Has that been your experience?
I completely agree with that. The toughest message to get across is photographing 150 fires over 10 years, even being on the ground taking thousands of photos over the last week. It's just hard to get across the scale of the destruction and devastation, the thousands of structures lost, the tens of thousands of people who will be displaced for years on end. Your assessment of that is spot on. It's just an absolute tragedy and a humanitarian crisis.
And Stuart, were you doing this as it was happening?
Yes, that's correct. So I was actually at the Eaton Fire in Altadena photographing that hours after the fire started. And as the fire came through into the town, I remember getting off the freeway and having small spot fires in the mulch off of the freeway in Altadena. It was fire behavior like I'd never seen in my career. We had hurricane force wind gusts of over 80 miles an hour in some areas.
And Stuart, explain to the audience in your own words how difficult, if not impossible, that makes it for firefighters arrayed to respond in a situation like that.
Of course, when you have winds that strong, you have embers creating spot fires 1, 2, even some cases 3 miles out front of the fire. And when it's moving that fast, all you can do is get people out of the way and try and save lives. At that point, saving structures becomes the priority after you've gotten people out of harm's way. And my heart breaks for every single person that lost their lives in this fire, who lost their homes. And first responders saved so many lives getting people out of harm's way, getting them out of hospital beds, people who were in nursing homes. So there were so many great saves done here. And I've seen a lot of criticism of the response, but I have to say that being there, and obviously you can see from my photos there, we were fighting against physics in a fire that did not stop until the wind stopped. And all we could do is get people out of the way. And then firefighters came back in and protected homes as best they could.
Stuart, did you have any moment where you were afraid for your physical safety?
I am fortunate to have a little bit of wildfire training, and so it took all of my expertise and knowledge and past fire experiences to be safe. But there were certainly factors that were concerning to me. We had tree branches 6 feet tall from palm trees flying through the air, stop signs of thin sheet metal flying through the air that if they hit somebody could cause serious injuries. So certainly there was a little bit of concern in the back of my mind to stay aware of the surroundings and what was going on and be safe, because my priority is to tell pictures and, more importantly, to be safe, because I want to stay out of the way of first responders and document them doing their job and not become a liability to them.
And the audience may have gleaned this, but I want to make sure they understand sometimes you are actually embedded with first responders. So you're right near them, not right alongside them, but near them. With this fire and the velocity, the enormity, what was their experience? What did you see in their eyes or their reaction to what they were up against?
Firefighters are typically to the point and straightforward, and I had multiple fire veterans who've been in the fire service in the Los Angeles area for over 30 years that are getting close to retirement tell me that this is the most extreme fire behavior they've seen. And remember, we're January right now. Fire season is year-round in California, but typically we've had wetting rains and the fuels are still so dry and we have potential winds in the future. So while fire crews are getting a break right now, we do have more winds in the forecast. So it's still all hands on deck and there's concerns there. But again, firefighters are telling me this is some of the most extreme fire behavior they witnessed in their careers. And these fires are within sight of downtown Los Angeles.
And when you were there, did you experience a phenomenon where people were evacuating like around you, like moving past you as you were moving in or closer to the fires?
That's correct, especially at the Eaton Fire in Altadena. The fire was moving so quickly. Of course, I parked my vehicle out of the way and walked in on foot, so my truck wasn't in the way of anybody. But I was walking up the sidewalk, and next to me, people were leaving the fire, going out, taking pictures as they left, FaceTiming their friends and family to make sure they got out. And I will say again, first responders and emergency services did a great job of getting people out of the way. But with the fire spreading so fast, people were leaving as I was photographing. It was chaos, most certainly, for a few hours.
This is an event that will define California's near-term future. It will define for the nation what wildfires can be at their most severe and damaging. Stuart Paley, you said you can't capture all of it, but the photographs we've seen capture a great deal of it, and we're indebted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.